Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Debt Collection 101 here on Our Bite You. Have two very awesome guests here today. One I so happen to get to work with every day, Tracy Montour, Director of Marketing here at Our Bite. And then I am also, we are also joined by Chris Von Huene, Director of Sales at Prodigal. So thanks so much, Chris, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
Cool. So today, what we're going to be talking about is finding, I guess, your voice, and two experts here on this, finding your voice in debt collection as a collection agency. It's not the most glamorous of industries. That doesn't have the best public image. So it's super important, right, to have that, and especially with a lot of the new contact methods that are happening now, the new CFPB ruling, right? So Chris, if you could just give us a little bit about, before we dive into all that, just anyone that's watching that maybe doesn't know who you are, if you could tell us about your background, your role at Prodigal, how you got there, how you got in this industry.
Yeah, so my background's kind of like a funky one. I was actually in finance for about 3 to 5 years. So I was like that number crunching guy. And then want to call it like a quarter life crisis. I just couldn't see myself doing it anymore. So everyone's like, well, you're like really outgoing. You should just try sales. And I'm like, what do I got to lose? So I packed everything up from San Diego, moved to San Francisco, and started working for some startups. And really just like got kicked in the teeth for a while because sales is pretty hard and there's not good training in it. And went through a couple different roles and now ended up at Prodigal. So for what I do at Prodigal is I'm the sales director. So I am responsible for the entire sales process, technology stack, as well as selling and then building out the go-to-market strategy. So I get to wear like 10,000 different hats and I still get to go sell, which makes me super excited. And then I get to go chat with y'all today. So y'all just making my day right now.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Of course.
That's awesome. And I like think it's amazing that you went from finance to being in sales, because you normally, associate finance with maybe not being so outgoing or people oriented. Right. So I'm glad you found something that's the right fit for you. But since you've been in this industry, what ways have you seen finding your own voice have a tangible impact on your success?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about when you find your voice is you can really establish a lot more credibility. So prior to me having like a sales conversation with someone, or like if a collector is, reaching out to an account, if they have a little bit more brand awareness of who you are and you're controlling that story narrative, so I'm a proponent of always getting out there first and owning that narrative, then it just really accelerates conversations, because people are like, oh yeah, I've already seen Chris's content on LinkedIn or his podcast or YouTube videos or Twitter, whatever. I'm on way too many channels. And it just really helps because you humanize yourself. So you're not just another person calling or just another salesperson. You actually have a little more context because they've been exposed to your brand. And then that just creates like a better bond. And sometimes you can just actually develop that relationship and build rapport a lot quicker and then accelerate your deal or accelerate, the collection process.
How do you think, so with debt collection, a lot of, putting yourself out there, like finding your voice, I feel like people always think it's different. This industry is different. Right. And it's not like, you can see it right. You deal with a lot of agencies, we do too, and it's not that common. Right. How do you think all this translates into the debt collection industry? Is there any truth to that? Is it different? How would you?
So I'll just compare it to sales, because like people hate salespeople, right? I usually don't meet too many folks who are like, "Yay, you're a sales guy. I want to talk to you." Like, no. Usually they're hanging up on the phone and like telling me never call them again, right? So like sales doesn't have a good reputation either. But I think what we can then do then in the opportunity that's here for everyone, especially in the debt collection industry, is to create the narrative that they want. And that's why I reference coming out first and foremost. So because like on LinkedIn, I post a lot about sales, and I'll be talking more about debt collections in the industry shortly, but I control that narrative. So then when people engage with me, like my prospects engage with me, they're like, hey, Chris, I love that personal development post that you were sharing. And like, I totally get those kinds of emails and they suck too. So it's just kind of a way to really just humanize it a little bit more. And it's also, there can be a lot of, being timid and being fearful, right? Because the industry is like debt collection, it feels sleazy and things like that. But if you don't start owning that narrative and changing that, saying like, hey, we actually help people, right? We help them get their credit back on track. We help them get to a better place in their life. And we're not here to just be these evil people. We're here to just try to make amends and get things as clean and as good as we can so we can all move forward. and you start sharing those customer stories, you start sharing about success, you start educating them about the benefits of paying those past due balances, how to work with those collection agencies, I think you're going to see people over time start changing their perception. But if you're not doing that, then you're basically giving the power for everyone else to create their own impressions. And I think that's what's happened in this industry today. But now fast forward with these new channels, we now have the opportunity to start shifting that perception for the better.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely think it's catching a little bit more traction now. Like you've seen it a lot this year. There's some
Yeah.
agencies that I can like. I mean, Jeff DiMatteo is active on LinkedIn, talks all the
Mhm.
time about his agency and the compliments they get. Right, they just
Right.
exceeded like the goal that they had for the year. That was awesome.
Right.
There's other people like Sean Williams, one of our clients, does it. They've started doing it this year. Tim Moore over at Markham, like all these agencies are doing this, and I think they're the bigger agencies that people look up to. So it's good to see that. So hopefully a lot of the smaller agencies start to try to take this, I guess, take their lead. I would
Yes,
like to see it.
definitely.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that there's more people than ever starting to find their voice in this industry and kind of
Right.
considering that they need a brand maybe for their collection agency where maybe they weren't so strategic about that in the past. And I know actually while we're recording this, Mike Gibb is having Customer Experience Week, which is really, there's so much content about this. And it's really exciting to see the collections industry kind of move in this direction. And at Arbite, we've been a company for many years, and we're still finding and defining our voice. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
it's something that you never stop doing. We're kind of going through that exercise right now. But
Mhm.
for people that are just starting out, do you have a strategy for how to get started, or where do you recommend starting this process?
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to really break this up. So I'm going to kind of go down like a tree diagram. If we're thinking about the overall company brand, then we really need to think about what stories are we trying to communicate, who are we trying to basically influence, and what does success look like. And then from there, you can start working with your individual people across their social media profiles and things like that to start sharing some content, stories, things of that nature that all align to this brand messaging. The caveat I'm going to say is please humanize that. Like, don't make this robotic post of like, our product does all this great stuff. Like, nobody cares. I will tell you that right now. I get a lot of those messages. I don't care. And I'm pretty sure no one else is. So make it human. Like, show what a day in the life looks like. Show how you have fun. Show how you think through things, or show some success stories. People love storytelling. So that would be my first thing, is like, tell it in a story. Like, Disney is fabulous at storytelling, right? Like that hero's journey, was it Brand Story by, I think, Stuart Miller or something like that? I'm forgetting his name, but Brand Story, that's the guide you want to follow when you're creating content. So that's a very good process to go through. Now, if we're thinking about it from an individual perspective, what you want to think about is, again, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to be seen as an authority in this space? Are you trying to use this for lead generation and revenue? Are you doing it for your own career growth? And then from there, who are you trying to reach, and what would they find valuable? So when I first started in sales, I didn't know anything. I just started in sales. But what I did know that was valuable was sharing my daily struggles. So I just talked about it day in and day out, very bluntly, challenging status quo of things and perceptions and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling to connect with somebody. I don't know how to handle objections. No one taught me like a good phone script. Where do I go? And that created a very supportive community because people want to help others and they love following your journey. So I think as an individual, share your journey until you develop that authority, and then share a little bit more about that authority, but always share your journey because people just love hearing what other people are going through. And again, it really humanizes you. So I think the main takeaway is either going from a brand perspective or an individual is humanize it. If you yourself would not engage with the content, do not post it. Like, use the human test, right? Write like a human, not like a robot, right? And make sure it's going to be valuable. So don't just rehash the 10 tips that have been out there for 5 years. Like, find a way to take a provocative point of view and really start a conversation. Even if people disagree, great. Like, start learning from each other, because like that's what people are craving, is just connection and community. And it always starts from our stories. So I think it's just, what story do you want to tell? Who do you want to tell it to? And then how do you want to influence, or what does the outcomes look like? So you know you're tracking and it's worthwhile for you to keep doing it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I love the part about you controlling the narrative of what gets put out there,
Yeah,
especially in this industry, right? You don't always get to control that. I mean, in any industry, like there's the consumers there's always been avenues for consumers to post about your business. So
correct.
like, right, controlling that narrative is super important in collections. And that kind of segues us into this next point. In the collections industry, there's always been, you know, a lot of agencies don't want to put themselves out there because they feel like it puts them at risk, right? Maybe there's a target on their back now because we all know the consumer attorneys that target agencies and whatnot. So it's like you hear this, I don't want to put myself out there. We're going to get more lawsuits or something like this.
Hmm.
Do you think, well, one, do you think there's any merit to this, and two, what would your advice be to an agency like this or counterpoint?
Yeah, so I will say there could potentially be some merit. And so this is how I think about it is one, make sure your QA compliance and training is down really well so you don't have to worry about it, right? So that's using like a platform like ours, which does help, QA folks ensure better compliance and better training opportunities. And then the other piece is if you're really concerned, run it by legal counsel just to get their general thoughts on it, just to make sure everyone feels comfortable and give people some guidelines. But beyond that, the consumers are going to talk about your brand, whether or not you're there talking about your brand. You can't stop that. What you can do is add to the conversation. So that's why I'm very focused on controlling that narrative. And it's not arguing with consumers in their reviews. It's just posting those success stories with customers, how you're helping people get back on track, or some things that, common misperceptions that people have of the collections industry, or even just taking on those negative assumptions, whether they're true or not, and just having a candid conversation. I mean, I do that for salespeople. It's like, hey, I know you hate a salesperson. We were always asking for your time. You get nothing in return. It's not fun. But like, how else do you understand, or how else do you keep up with the changes in the marketplace if I wasn't soliciting you? Because you don't have time. But maybe that little sneaky email that I wrote that was really crafty got your attention. You're like, wow, I didn't know about that. So again, there's a lot of ways we can kind of go about it. And what I would ask everyone here is just think a little more creatively. I know that we're kind of more like refined and very, risk adverse. But I think if we think about it from a more human perspective and what we can do to, this is more like a branding game, right? And again, the law firms are going to find you. They already know that you exist. Like that doesn't that doesn't change anything because you're out there on social. The question is just, do you want consumers to have a better understanding of who you are and humanizing your brand? And then if you're concerned with the lawsuits, again, that's looking at it from more of QA compliance and training opportunities, and technology that's out there in the marketplace today can definitely help with that as well.
Definitely. So what are a few ways that agencies can begin using their voice in this industry and make themselves more accessible? I know we just touched on a few like strategies, but what are some quick ways they can get started?
So I'm a huge fan of like micro video series, like what we're doing together right now with the holiday series. Like I think that is epic. So I love video content. So I would just produce like quick little, 2-3 minute videos. They don't need to be crazy, but just quick little tips and tricks, or, pick a theme and run with the theme, right? How we're kind of doing the day in the life in QA. So just do like a day in the life of a consumer and like the impacts that collections have and like the benefits and how they can think through it. Or what I wish I would have known as a consumer when I went into collections. Again, it's educational pieces, right? So I think if you make some short, educational, fun, lighthearted pieces, that's a great way to start. And then have like employees that just kind of share their experiences of like, hey, I helped this customer get to this point, or we were able to reconcile this, or they're now able to buy the house that they wanted because we were able to settle that debt. So again, like just sharing like little stories and things like that, or even just like, hey, here's like some of the things that we're thinking through, or some of the trends that we notice. If you want to talk about more from an industry perspective, here's how to go prepare for that so you don't end up in collections, right? I mean, we're trying to just add value as much as we can and have that positive association with our brand. So think about what's going to be the most impactful to those end consumers, or what you would want them to know before you call and collect on them, and help get them, educated and aware so they're able to basically you just kind of know, because I think a lot of people just don't know too much about this industry. So we have a really good educational opportunity here, and whoever's going first, you get that first mover advantage, and then the rest will follow afterwards once they see that success.
Yeah, I agree. And then it's like all this also adds that trust building
Yep.
process with the consumer, right? You
Yep.
know, every day I feel like we're losing more and more trust with like people that call us and text us because of all the scams and such out there. So,
Correct.
if you Google this company that calls me and leaves me a voicemail and you see like, well, here's their collectors talking about these great things and these stories, and like, here's all this information, like you're instantly going to gain this like trust factor with that person. It's, oh, they're not a
Correct.
scam, right? I mean, I used to be a collector, and I don't have enough fingers and toes to count every month how many times someone was like, "Oh, is this a scam?" Like that's always what people, and that was 9 years ago now, so it's
Right.
only gotten worse. Um, but yeah, I really appreciate it. It's all the questions we got. Is there anything else you want to add, Chris?
I think the last thing I would add is I think about, getting out there and building your voice as kind of like marketing. So A/B test things, right? Like find out what's working, but always just keep trying new things. And the reason why I say that is because if we're not evolving, then by default, you're essentially lagging. And we don't have the luxury with how fast technology moves and how fast this world moves to be lagging. So I know it's scary. I know like there's all these concerns, but my one piece of advice is like just get started and just test the water a little bit and just keep pushing it a little bit, little bit, little bit. Cause like for me, it took me a year to build my brand on LinkedIn. And now I got one of the top voices on LinkedIn. It took 12 months to do it, right? But the benefit of that is it got me my job at Prodigal today. It's opened up so many doors for me. And same thing, it helps me generate business right now. So I think there's infinite amount of benefits beyond just building the voice. It does help with that brand reputation. It helps with revenue generation. It helps with you just getting new business because now other companies know that you exist. So when they're thinking of shipping out that debt, like, oh, I should be calling this company because I see them on LinkedIn all the time or whatever the social medium is. So there's a lot of benefits out there. And I think the benefits outweigh, the negative consequences or potential ones. So my ask would just be try it for at least like 6 months because it does take some time to build and get used to it before you're going to pull the plug or not. So don't just assume that month one it's going to be this magic boom and everything happens. This is a long game. So I hope that you just have that mindset for the long term and not just this short term little pop, or else it won't deliver what you're expecting.
I agree 100%. And don't get caught up in numbers. If your first post doesn't get 10,000 likes, don't
No,
quit.
no,
You don't need that.
no.
It's there. People see it regardless if they interact with it.
Exactly. Like I have evergreen content. People reference like podcasts I've been on like a year ago. They're like, oh yeah, remember that podcast? I'm like, absolutely not. But you do, and that's all that matters. Like, so you get a lot of value from that evergreen content as well. But the goal isn't looking at likes or comments on the initial 3 months. You're just
Right.
trying to figure the system out. Start looking at numbers after 90 days, assuming you've been consistent, which means you're posting and engaging on social at least 3 to 5 times a week. Then after those 90 days, start tracking your metrics at that point because they will be meaningful. But anything prior to that, you're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Tracy, you have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, I think the main thing is a lot of people are scared to get started. I know that even people I know that are marketers by trade, like they're scared to get out there for their own personal brands. So
Right.
whether it's your corporate brand or your personal brand, I mean, just go out there and do it. People are not as mean as you think they are, and mostly people want to just interact with you and help you. So
Yep.
I would go for it.
All right. Great tips, great information in this episode. Thanks so much, Tracy. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you coming on and doing this with us. So for everyone watching, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Thanks.